Nigerians are wondering because what they hear are the figures up there, and then the realities of what they face on daily basis, especially from the window of inflation and liquidity and so on. Now, from your understanding, has there been justification for all of these borrowings and the rising debt profile that Nigeria is accumulating?
You see, in all honesty, I think there's been some justification. I mean, to really be fair to the government. You see, we have multiple issues on our hands. I mean, there's this development issues where we're talking about infrastructure deficit and things like that. We have the poverty problem on our hands. We have unemployment issues here and there. And so the government, I think the governance philosophy of President Buhari, is to look at whether in reflecting, I mean, its strategy to reflecting the economy was to, or is to, address infrastructure deficit. And the government thought, well, if we're able to address infrastructure deficit, on the one hand, we can, provide some level of employment to our young people, and then we can also then attract investors into the country because nobody will come into an environment where infrastructure is lacking. So that is the philosophy of governance for President Buhari. And then in addressing that infrastructure deficit, he then went all out to say, yes, I'm going to borrow, but I'm going to borrow for infrastructure. And he did borrow for infrastructure. And when you look at what the Ministry of Works, for instance, had done over the last 7 years plus, yes, they've indeed invested in road infrastructure. When you look at Ministry of Transportation, for instance, they've invested in rail infrastructure. And the last time you can look at it, look at aviation, the airports are, taking shape now, and it's fair. But at what cost to the country? At what cost to us, the citizens? I think those are the issues. And then the other part is also that we have also now been borrowing for consumption. And that is the sad part of it. I mean, if we're borrowing for just capital spending, yes, you can excuse that. But even capital spending, what is the procurement process like? What is the contracting process like? How transparent is the contracting process? At what rate are we implementing these infrastructure projects compared to what are being implemented even in the African continent? I think those are some of the issues that and I think some other people have with the government. But again, like I said, we have now also been borrowing for consumption. Recall that the federal government just recently, secured $800 million World Bank facility again to intervene around the subsidy removal. It says to cushion the effect of subsidy removal, and then that money is going to be doled out to people in cash. It says, to help them, cope with the pains and the strains of subsidy removal. That's consumption. That's full consumption. Could there have been another way to address that? I think there could have been another way to address that difficulty that people will face as a result of subsidy removal. Not necessarily to go and borrow to then give out cash to people and things like that. I think that's not what we need. If we're going to do anything around consumption, it should be from internally sourced revenue. And then if we're going to borrow, then we borrow and invest massively in the capital spending and and address the infrastructure deficits that we have. I think those are some of the issues that that needs to be addressed.
Right, because there are a majority of economists who say that tackling the spate of our borrowing and the fact that there is low revenue generation is a major concern that the next administration would have to face, especially the loan repayment processes and all of it. Now, when you look at this matter, how do you think that the incoming administration can address that? There are those who have said that perhaps we might have to look into renegotiating some of these loans.
Well, in terms of renegotiating the loans, I don't think that is feasible. Because I mean, if I'm the lending institution, for instance, and we already had an agreement, provided you recall that inflationary pressures is not just a local issue; it's a global problem. So while I provided the facility to you, I'm not going to succumb to inflationary pressure to then begin to now renegotiate the facility with you, because already, like I said, inflationary pressures are global issues. It's not just a local problem. So it will be difficult for me to then come back to the table to begin to renegotiate the interest rates, the tenor, the moratorium, and the likes. I think what we have a president-elect who is, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and he was former governor of Lagos State. I think he has his template already on what he plans to do, and I think he's done some of that. He's tested some of those policy options before in Lagos State and continues to test it, with successive governments in Lagos State. I think there's a template. And I foresee that his template will be to expand the revenue base of the country, possibly to increase, to reform the tax system, bring more people that are currently not paying or underpaying taxes into the tax net. It would then mean that you need to create some tax incentives. And see, we make, there's a saying that tax payment or tax remittance in Nigeria is one of the lowest when you look at tax GDP. Nigeria is one of the lowest. And I don't see any reason why taxing in Nigeria should be extremely difficult. I think what the problem is that people are not incentivized to pay tax. And the reason is because if I provide water for myself, I provide electricity for myself, I have to use inverter or to use generator or to things like that, and I have to go buy fuel to fuel my generator, and there is no incentive whatsoever, then I struggle to make all of that revenue. And at the end of the month, you then expect me to take up some of that revenue that I struggle to make, providing my own infrastructure to put my business in shape, to then give it to government to do what? So those are the issues. And I heard the president-elect, speaking at one of his forums during the campaign and saying that he is willing to provide tax incentives. And I hope that he's able to do, extend those tax incentives to small businesses, because they form, the larger populace of the business community in Nigeria. Yes, the big multinationals will continue to pay, but then they all even find a way around it, because they have professionals that help them to find a way around their books. But what happens to the small and medium enterprises? We need to create and ensure that we provide tax incentives for them that encourages them to pay, no matter how little their taxes are, even if it is 1 naira, they're encouraged to pay because they know they're getting something in return, from government to help their businesses. I foresee that those are some of the reforms that the president-elect will bring on board to, expand the revenue base of the country. But certainly, there are other policy options.
All right. There was a call sometime recently for that Nigeria should begin to look at the possibility of seeking debt cancellation. I wonder if Nigeria qualifies for a debt cancellation by any of its creditors, or as the case may be.
Yeah, I could not hear the last part. If you can take that again.
No, I was asking if some people are calling for debt cancellation for Nigeria. Does Nigeria qualify to seek debt cancellation at this time?
No, I think it's a lazy approach to it. If you have the guts to take loans, you should have the capacity to pay back. But that's not to say that there's not the option of debt cancellation. I think where the debt cancellation issue is coming, and where African countries, including Nigeria, are hoping to leverage debt cancellation, is around the issue of the climate change issues that the West and other European countries are concerned about, and African countries, including Nigeria, are hoping that, well, if you want us to implement some of these policies, some of this policy, then there must be incentives. So it's still, again, for instance, we're talking about now incentives between countries. Recall, I just spoke about, the country, Nigeria government itself providing incentives to taxpayers. Now, Nigerian government is now hoping to get incentives from, colleagues within the global community to say, okay, if you are hoping that I will be able to commit to some of these policy reforms and around climate and all of that, can you also provide this leeway for us? Can you also relieve us in these areas? Because these are areas that we are also, concerned about.